Alrighty, and we are go now. 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, this is Glenn Weissel of the Creative Consciousness Podcast. With me today is Michael Elenko, a good friend of mine who I have known for a long time. Interestingly enough, we met in Seattle, and we're both from the East Coast. So there you go. Michael, how you doing?
I'm fine, Glenn. Yeah, we have a lot of similarities actually. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Doing well.
Yeah, yeah,
Keeping things
yeah.
moving.
Yeah, we're
As
about the same age and
yeah,
have parallel lives. Yeah,
yeah, very much, very much.
with
So
with
we,
intersections.
yeah. Speaking of intersections, the um, the background for us in photography parallels a lot. We both got started when we were young and have moved along different parallels, but parallels nonetheless. So that's why we have so much in common and why we wanted to have this conversation today. So we both worked at a very large, well-known coffee company based out of Seattle. And Starbucks for sure. And that's what was that in 2000 what 14 15 something like
Earlier, I was there from 2006 to 2011.
oh okay right
You were there
so
longer than me.
yeah that's true so thanks for the reminder. The dates after last year I tend to just miss and
It,
forget, so yeah,
it's
2006
healthier
would be
that way.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. So we worked for the same department, same company,
Hmm.
had a lot of fun together. We figured out pretty quickly we were both photographers, and we started a photography group at Starbucks. It was a dozen or more people easily. We go out and do some assignments and get together at lunchtime and just shoot and have a really good time and come back once a month and show what we've been working on. So that was a whole lot of fun.
And that led to more
Yeah.
corporate gigs, kind of,
E-
which was fun.
Exactly right.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. One of those corporate gigs was going to New Orleans a couple of years. I think it was after Hurricane Katrina, pretty much flattened the whole area. And it was also a really dark time in financial history, not only at the company where we work, but across America. And
Mhm.
the leadership at Starbucks, who were brilliant, um, figured out that the best way to bring the company back together was to get something like 10,000 partners, the employees, directors, and above, in one single place. And because Starbucks is such a community-based company, um, they wanted to do a huge volunteer collaboration, and New Orleans was the point. So we had gone down, there was about 13 of us photographers, went to New Orleans on the company dime, which is wonderful, stayed at a really great place. And for about a week, we photographed the meetings, the community activities in 4 or 5 different huge projects across different areas of New Orleans. And that was my first foray down there. So I loved the history, the architecture, the people were great, and even more than that was the camaraderie that I experienced being down there with a team of photographers pulling together a huge amount of work each
Mm.
day and making that available for presentation. What do you
Yeah,
think,
that was
River?
that was complicated. It was a lot of things to balance. I had gone there prior, um, about a month prior, for a week to scout out the shooting locations and meet with the community groups in the Ninth Ward, which suffered most of the damage, the hard hit damage, and it was a low income ward.
Yeah.
So I remember coordinating with the community groups saying, well, this is what they expect the volunteers to be doing, and this is what we'd like to have photographic coverage of. And that was fun, but it was intense because I ended up in the heart of the Ninth Ward in very damaged areas from Katrina, and it was just painful. I mean, it was intense still 2 years later to see the scope of damage. It was very otherworldly on a way. And then I also met with that production company out of New York, which was fun. It was fun doing business down there. It's a very different vibe than
Yeah.
in Seattle even, which is fairly chill, but nothing's as chill as New Orleans. So that was fun. It was very rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good times, good memories, and something I'll always keep with me as we go through life together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about or find out from you what your inspiration for photography is, what it has been in the past and what it is today, and go from there.
Okay. Thanks. Well, I have a pretty interesting, I have to, it's arrogant, but I have an interesting background in that I grew up in the photography business. My grandfather started the country's first mail order color film processing operation out of Astoria, Queens, called Allstate Photo. And that was I think that was in the 50s. And he had a front end camera store, retail camera shop. And being a small family business still, my folks, my mom had worked there before I was born, and even my father, who did not have a photographic background, helped out as well. So, I became part of that in the early 60s just as a kid. So I grew up in that store, and in those days, people would send cash in, right? You'd send coins and cash. So I would sort through all the coins that people would send in search of rare coins. And I would pick out the rare Indian heads and all that. And I still have them. They're up on my shelf behind me. I still have those coins. So, but growing up in that environment, I had cameras everywhere. They were just part. I mean, photography is my second language, so to speak, because it is just a part of me, just both the business sense of it, and they were very prudent about having me not do that as a primary living, because it's a risky business. It just is. You're subject to a lot of technological advancements and changes, and there's always someone with a bigger budget than you, and that end. And creatively, I mean, my grandfather, I found after he died, I found a lot of more artistic shots that he took, and it's a tough thing to pursue full time. These days, it's even harder. But so my inspiration is really, you know, is communicating whatever I'm feeling within through the lens and through my perception, using the camera as a tool, essentially. I do a lot of professional artwork and exhibitions and galleries and stuff, and basically all that really means is that as an artist, you're trying to say something using the language of photography. It's a pretty picture. It's more, this image has meaning. I have intention behind it, and I want you to observe that. And hopefully the goal is that we can both share some common understanding and feeling or perception over what you are seeing, and you can grok kind of my drift that I'm aiming at communicating.
Yeah. This is like visual storytelling.
Essentially, I mean, one cool, for all your listeners or even for you, I would recommend reading Susan Sontag's On Photography. It's a classic book. When did she write it? In the late 70s, I think, before she passed away. She was a philosopher out of Chicago, and really understood photography on the very deep communication level as a tool. And one great point that she makes is photography as an art has been argued on and off since the mid 1800s. But she says, look, that's really not the issue. What photography is a communications medium, just like writing, with its own set of visual signs and cues and things like that. So you can use photography in innumerable ways to communicate stuff, it's the context that derives the meaning of your photographs. So for example, we were driving to Montana recently to see our daughter, and we're at Mountain Pass, Snoqualmie Pass, and a a boulder came down off the mountain and hit the corner of my windshield as I was going 74 miles an hour. Yowza, right?
Yeah,
So
that gets loud. I've had that happen too, man. Yes.
well, it's shocking, and you really don't see it coming until a third of a second before it hits. Fortunately, it hit mostly the body at the bottom corner. So anyway, for this story, I had to take a photograph of that windshield to send to insurance. That's not art. That's just however, if I put on an art exhibition of 50 photographs of broken windshields, that may well be art. So it really depends on the context of what you're communicating and how.
Right, right. Man, I love that. The moment you said that taking the picture of the windshield in itself wasn't art, I thought, oh, it could have made it art though. Knowing you, Michael, you could have made it really, I know it's specifically for insurance, but let's
Yeah,
give it a little tweak here and there.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Thanks. I don't know if I'm that good, but
So
so.
the photo that you have behind you, what is that?
Oh, that's a shot at Vashon Island where I live in the state of
Yeah.
Washington, and it's a real island. You got to take a ferry to get here,
Right.
and that is an area known as Fern Cove, and during a very low tide,
Hmm.
and you're looking west, and it's just a big wide angle image, about 14 millimeters or so, um, and very vibrant. It's a beautiful place for photography.
Yeah, it
So
looks like.
yeah, and usually I mount my photographs either on an art panel such as that, or on an art panel with a background in my own kind of its own way I engineered with a frame around that.
Hmm.
I've kind of eschewed glass in the last few years. I just find it gets in the way,
Oh yeah.
and it
Okay.
makes every image look glossy, kind of,
Right.
and not every image is glossy. That is on a very subtle soft gloss paper
Okay. Are
that has
you,
some texture.
yeah, sorry, are you printing your own material?
I print everything up to 16 by 24.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then for the really big pieces, I will outsource that to a few selected shops.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, to me, printing your artwork makes you a more complete photographer. I come from the darkroom days.
Yeah.
I grew up in this practice, so I've I had a color darkroom in the '80s and had a black and white darkroom before that, and through university I would use the university darkrooms, which was a really nice deal. And throughout high school, my friend Sean Cunningham, who works for a newspaper that he and his wife started in Chester, Vermont. We took over the high school darkroom when we were like in seventh grade, and spent much of our time hanging out in there, figuring out the universe. So
Sounds like it was a good time. I just looking at you right now, I can tell you had fond memories of that.
well, it was, and it's funny listening. My daughter had to go through high school. She had to take a photography class, and it was
Yeah.
the last year for the old style. So she would share her tales of being in the dark room, and of course, you lose track of time in the dark room. She told me, "Well, gosh, I missed my next class. We were just so engaged." And it's like I know the feeling. Even now, with working in Lightroom and Photoshop, I can. Oops, it's 2 a.m.
Yeah, exactly right. Yep.
I got to get up tomorrow.
The hours just burn and blow by.
Yeah.
Uh, that's great, Michael. Thanks for that. Let's do a segue, and I'm going to share my screen because you had offered something to take a look at in this, and I want to bring that up.
Okay. There
So
we
this
go.
is your website, Digital to Go, and it's
That's my
reviewing
brand.
the instant. Yeah, it's a great brand. Is that your design?
Thanks.
Is that your brand design as well?
I worked at my graphic artist Richard Rogers and I go back about 20 some years, and so we meet and collaborate. But he does the actual art skills. I have the concept, but he executes.
Nice.
We work well as a partner team.
Okay. Well, let's talk through some of your images here taken with a Polaroid XS70,
Hmm.
which is probably out of most people's minds about now. So talk a little bit about the camera and the
Okay.
styling.
All righty. So, well, I don't know. Hopefully, this is on your video, but this is the actual SX70 camera that I used.
Yeah.
It is in the Metropolitan Museum collection of modern art, um, because the design for 19 this came out in 74 or so. It's just stunningly beautiful. It's an SLR, and it's chrome and leather, and folds down flat, which is cool design. And what was really neat about it is, both at the time the film, and you can tell by looking at the shots, during this time, there was not very many heavily saturated color images being made. Kodak and GAF or, AGFA kind of had the color film market, and those are more subtle colors. Now, viewers today, when they see things online, they will see a lot of saturated colors, because that seems to be the style since internet image sharing has gotten popular since the early 90s or so. So it's a way of getting attention visually pretty quickly. But back in the day, you essentially had Cibachrome in the early 80s come in as a popular way to punch up images, and ad agencies use that a lot. But for us other folks, the Polaroid SX70 was used a lot by artists. And um, at the time, I was working in Tacoma, and in the very intense Hilltop area. I was a social worker up there, and Hilltop was, yeah, it was as inner city as it gets in the Northwest. And there was a pawn shop, and I noticed this SX70 camera sitting in the window. I said, "Oh, I've always wanted one of those." Because, my grandfather was a charter Polaroid dealer, and I grew up with the massive 5 pound early black and white 4x5 Polaroids, essentially, where you'd get this. The end product would be this 3.5 inch black and white picture with serrated edges that you'd rip off, which was a miracle for the time. So, um, so I kind of, as a youth, fixated on Polaroid cameras. Anyway, for this, I said, okay, yeah, this is at a pawn shop. It was really cheap. I said, okay, haha, I'll get that. And then I, I, I noticed how the match of the film and the image format, they're square images with a bottom heavy border. Somehow the lens that they chose managed to capture and distort to a very artistic degree objects. And a lot of artists, as you hopefully the shots reveal here, it just adds a really fascinating rendering of architecture and of closer in objects. And the colors are very, very intense. In addition, what was very popular at the time was that once the film was kicked out of the camera, yeah, you could take a stylus, a soft ball pointed pen, and manipulate the backgrounds. So in case of fire image you see, I would take that stylus and then move around the development chemicals after it rendered the shot to create that weird kind of interesting, what I think was interesting background there. And that was like a big cult around the country doing that, and it was a lot of fun. In addition, you could also peel apart the actual sandwich of the print and have a kind of a transparency with the image on it. And then what I did in terms of like the scary vats of Nally Valley, then you could take some oils, or I used vegetable dyes actually, and paint in and enhance part of the scene to meet whatever you want to do with it. So I ended up doing some of that as can be shown on these images as well. And then you'd seal them up, and then you're done. So I have had these images framed. These are from the mid 1980s, let's say 1983 to about 1986, when I went on a run of shooting a lot when we were living in Tacoma, shooting a lot of strange things. I had some free time on my hand throughout that time, and Tacoma was just a fun place. It's all sorts of weird. It's like Baltimore. There's a lot of weird buildings and very. It's strong on the human level. Um, so so I'd go around doing a lot of weird shots like this, and I noticed that when I took I was scheduled to have a solo show in August in the Vashon Center for the Arts, and I was going to show these original SX70s, but I realized that they were starting to degrade over time, and I thought, oh, that's not good. So, and there's nothing I can do to preserve that. So I thought, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to scan them and then um, clean them up and enlarge them a bit to more of a 7 by 7 inch size, 7.5 by 7.5 inch size, and then place them in the same kind of viewing context as the original SX70s. So each of these will be shown without my logo on the bottom, but will be shown on an 8 by 10 sized artwork hanging. So I was able to, where the color started to fade, I was able after the scan to clean it up a bit and make the color more true and clean up any noise and all that technical stuff, and still maintain the integrity of the image, and voila.
Yeah, voila is right. This is one of my favorites. The number 56 bus went to downtown.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's just slightly askew, which appeals to me greatly. And then the colorized back, the seat backs, the vibrancy of them. And then it says, if I look at the back window long enough, it starts moving forward for
Oh,
me.
that's true. There is an optical. I never caught that, but thank you. That's cool.
Yeah. So these are great.
And in the original, those were the colors of the seats on the bus. I just kind of gone over them to make them stand out more. But yeah, they had these weird faded turquoise vinyl and faded kind of a peachy.
Lovely.
That's why I tell you, it's weird. It's definitely good camera material.
All right. Let me stop the share here. Get back to this. Those were fun to look at. I'm sure people are going to appreciate your exhibition with those.
Thank you. Yeah, there's stories to all of them, I think.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly. So going back a ways, you've already talked about how you got into photography, and I love that story about, just growing up with cameras in your young life. I remember my mom gave me her old Kodak Brownie camera when I was about 7 or 8, maybe, still living in Brooklyn, and getting film was easy enough, and just slap the rolls in there and then go out. And I was doing street shots before I knew what street shots were really all about. So
yeah,
those are always fun. And then sometimes I think it'd be fun to just take my camera and go into Denver or some other area, Colorado Springs, and find some really old gnarly things to start filming again, because quote unquote filming, digital camera.
Yeah,
For
sure.
Those are a blast.
127 film.
Yeah.
For the Brownie.
Yeah, right. I still have it. It's in my closet.
Oh, cool.
It's even got a reflector for the old light bulbs.
Oh, neat. Yeah, my first camera was an Instamatic, a Kodak Instamatic, little rectangle thing, that perfect design, 126 cartridge.
Yep.
The first kind of cartridge film. You didn't have to do much, just drop it in and wind it.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about who are your influencers in the art world. Who are the professional artists that you like, who you grew up with, how they influenced you?
Well, I'd say for my landscape, my naturalistic landscape shots, there's a photographer named Elliot Porter who's long deceased, and he was active in the 50s and 60s pretty much, and he's known for color photography, because back then color photography was not considered art photography. It was still black and white. It wasn't until MoMA started featuring William Eggleston's work in the 60s that color photography started getting a bit of a panache as a art concept. What I liked about Elliot Porter is that he would take landscape shots of just ordinary scenes. It didn't have to be the Grand Canyon. It didn't have to be a sexy, pretty picture, quote unquote. And and he would just focus on that and reveal the light and the color with the light upon it in the forest of trees or leaves or fields or whatever. Highly influential for me. I really like those shots because it shows that you can go anywhere for beauty, and it really depends upon what's in your head and what you perceive and what you want to communicate. So that is one major influence. I remember seeing books of his work. What blew me away is that one of his shots is in my osteopathic doctor's waiting room. I was just killing time last year, waiting to see him, and what's an Elliot Porter shot? And then I asked him about it. He said, "Oh, I won that in an auction."
That's
I said, "Oh,
terrific.
it's a great. He's great. He's my favorite." I said, "Oh, he was thrilled by that." It was just you just never know, right?
Right.
Life's funny that way. For more modern, a lot of my work these days is more of a modern landscape, urban scenes or natural scenes that are not quote unquote pretty scenes. And a lot of that comes from Stephen Shore's work, and he's very well known these days. But back in the 70s, he was not as well known. He has a famous. Your listeners can look up his famous shot Chevron, which is really an amazing shot taken in, is it Arizona or LA or whatever, and it shows a Chevron gas station, just an ordinary scene, but it's got zillions of complicated relationships among the objects. And art historians have taken it apart, showing how it rivals, Rembrandt scenes in terms of the mathematics behind the placement of objects and stuff. So his capturing of ordinary scenes just amazes me always. So he's one, and then Robert Adams is an American photographer who is still alive. He practiced a lot in the 60s and 70s, holds numerous Guggenheim fellowships. He also has a lot of modern landscapes and generally shoots in black and white, and kind of focused on the changing landscape of suburban America. And some of that was actually near you that he photographed as those suburban communities was being built. And he would show how the land is changing. And he would shoot in the middle of the day when the sun is just glaringly oppressive. And I really respect those. He got a lot of rewards for those shots. And he was also the juror for an art exhibit in Astoria, Oregon that I was included in. So I got to meet him and talk with him quite a bit. And that was one of the thrills of my life. So I'd say those three are super big influences.
Nice. Real good. I know one of my all-time favorite photographers is Ansel Adams, and I do my best to come close to what he's done, and it still pales in comparison, but hey, that's what we're out here for, is getting better all the time to do our thing with the camera
Yeah.
black and white. So
He was a Polaroid guy, and Polaroid developed these huge 8x10 instant cameras, and he would borrow. They'd give him, go have fun, and he would use them to shoot portraits and weird scenes and stuff. And he would consult them on color and stuff. Amazing.
Yeah.
He'd be a big Photoshop guy these days, I think.
Probably so, because he really enhanced the craft of burning and dodging in the darkroom a lot to bring out what he saw in his mind's eye, based on the image there. So, yeah. All right, we're going to move into the exhibitions that you have been busy with over the years. Let me share the screen again really quick.
I'll sneak a cup of coffee while you do that.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, thank you. Hmm.
So we've got solo exhibitions and group exhibitions, and some quite well. This is the one you're talking about coming up next
Mm-hmm.
month. In fact, if I wasn't so far away, I would definitely be visiting you and seeing that in the gallery. So do it vicariously, though.
Well, thank you. I'm trying to convince them to do a walkthrough for an online, because I've been in a few other exhibitions earlier this year in Texas at the A. Smith Gallery, very good gallery down there in Johnson City. They
Hmm.
did a whole walkthrough of everyone's art that was hanging, since no one could visit live. So that was kind of sweet.
Right, right. So you have been at this quite a while. I mean, we go back to 1983,
Yeah.
right? And you've got quite a few honors as well. Anything that stands out for you that you want to brag about?
You know, not, I love all my children. I mean, it's all good. It's an honor to be in any exhibition, to be
Yeah,
chosen for that. I mean, I'm either invited, which is nice, or I go through the competition process per se. And that, you know, I encourage everyone to do this. I taught a workshop earlier in the year about how to enter art competitions, and essentially it all boils down to the taste of the juror and what they're trying on. I've been in that role
hmm,
of jurying myself, and I've facilitated other artists jurying artwork. And a juror's role is challenging, because they have all these they have an excess of material to select from, and they have a theme usually, and so it's their job to craft that theme and to populate it with the right images, and they have to decide on sequence and how things fit and flow. And that's beyond I think it's beyond the capacity of any artist submitting work. You just have to, in a way, luck out and see if the juror likes your stuff enough to include it or to award it prizes or anything like that. So that would be my take on all of that. Sometimes you luck out and get included, and sometimes you don't. And I mean, the challenge for me is when I review online, the winning entries in something that I didn't get selected for, to try to keep my ego out of it and to try to objectively see, oh, okay, I guess it wouldn't fit in, would it? Because the jurors are all highly skilled. That in all of these, they're good evaluators of artwork, and they have a vision, and that's great.
nice. That's awesome. Would you say that's true not only for galleries but magazines as well? So anyone who's listening who wants to submit their art, whether it's photography or watercolor or acrylics, because our audience,
Mm-hmm.
spans the gamut of artistic creativity, and there's some fantastic artists out there who are listening who would love to know more about how to engage with juried exhibitions and why. What's the purpose of that? What's the point?
Yeah, I'll answer the second part first, because it's I think the point, there's multiple points and reasons why to do it. One is to challenge yourself, just to say, here, this is who I am. This is my vision as an artist. Here it is, universe. Here it is, juror. Evaluate, make a judgment, please, because a lot of us don't like to be judged. But I think it's sometimes, and with this, it's good to have some constraints around what you do, just for the feedback, at least. Other good reasons are, sometimes you can get some money out of it if you get awarded, or if somebody buys your artwork. It's great for your reputation. I mean, if your name is in enough places over and over again, people will recognize it. And I have a few friends I've developed through these exhibitions online. You see someone in the same shows as you, it gives you a lot of common reference points. So there's some communitarian aspects of that. Um, Sometimes it might lead to gigs for people. Sometimes an agent, if it's a really known gallery, agents will see something. Hasn't happened to me this way. I've been approached by agents on other things, but they might say, hey, your stuff is really, really great. Let me rep you, in this kind of ways. Or it could be a magazine editor or photo editor who has a inventory of stories that they're working on, and they need to hire artists or photographers for that, and they may have that in the back of their head, and voila, if they see a style you have, it's not your shot per se, but it's the perspective, the angle you bring on it. That's where someone may recognize what you're doing. So those are the positive things. The negatives are that they usually cost. You got to pay to play in a lot of these things. Not for magazines. For publications, it's generally a lot of magazines are on assignment. Though for art magazines, yeah, it's more portfolio based, and we can talk about that in a little bit. That's a real challenge. I find personally. More than a greatest hits collection, let's say. So those, I think my advice to people wanting to get into this is to get connected in your community to either other artists or other photographers, get to know gallery owners if you can, get to know museum people, because they're connected and they also will give you feedback. One really needs constructive feedback besides your friends and your loved ones, because they love you, and they love you too much in ways, right? They don't want to hurt your feelings, or they just can't perceive, any shortcomings in your work. But you want to get the constructive feedback from people who have an educated eye, so you can improve. The improvement cycle is so critically important, I find, for my own life, to show my work to people. What do you think? What needs improvement? Don't be shy. Don't be mean, but don't be shy, essentially. So there are groups that'll do portfolio reviews out there in communities. Photographers will get together, and every month someone will lay out some prints, and you can give feedback that way. That happens a lot. So that you can do it online as well. There are Facebook groups for that. It's a hit and miss quality wise, because it's Facebook.
Right.
It's super democratic, and people think they're experts and they're really not. And again, according to me, and sometimes there are really great experts out there. So it's hit and miss, but it's a convenient way to show off your stuff as well. So it's really the feedback loop will refine your vision. You also get to see other things that people are doing. The issue with photography is that it's so iterative and people younger shooters especially tend to be trend driven. So if teal and green is teal and orange is the flavor of the month, then the next 3 months everyone will be showing shots with that motif, and that's not art. That's fashion. That's pop trends.
Right.
The goal with an artist is you really don't know if you're going to be a great artist until you're long dead, right? That's the irony in all this. You really don't know, because people who are big today may peter out. It's like with music, may peter out and not be really, really popular. And with movies, if you go back 15 years and you see the Academy Award winners, sometimes you just shake your head. How could that be? This was trivial pop, right?
Right.
Same with any kind of communicative arts, but some things will remain. And that's the stuff that has long-term value and speaks to future and forever generations. Just like with music, John Coltrane or Miles Davis or the Beatles, right? The songs are still relevant. The music still has that it's got whatever that is.
Yeah.
Andy Warhol has gotten greater since he passed away. His stuff is highly valuable, both monetarily and visually. Ansel Adams too. I mean, you don't know where you're going to end up.
That's right. That's right.
So you just try to be yourself.
Very much.
A lot of also, I this day and age, you have to be somewhat of a self-promoter online to a degree, but I think you have to, there's a rubber line there between being obnoxious and communicating the facts about what you're doing. And I know our times, both politically and socially, lean towards the obnoxious, but I think people will respect you a little more, maybe. I tend to respect people who are a little more, slightly more humble. Say, hey, this is what's going on, this is what I'm doing. Not, this is the greatest in the universe, and I was selected. That's, you know, says me. So that's, you know, I was raised to be a little more modest than that, I guess. It comes down to your values, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Michael. Thanks for that. Something you mentioned a few moments ago about receiving feedback. It's important from a technical aspect. It's also super important from I'm going to call it, well, there is the ego, the human aspect of being able to receive feedback openly and objectively and not take it personally, because it's, it's, our art is a reflection of us in a way. And also it's, it can change moment by moment. I know for myself, if my mood is dark, I'm going to be creating dark images, right? And so we just have to flow with that. And some people may not be in tune with it, and others may say, "Oh man, I love that." So you never really know what's going to be coming our way in terms of feedback. But great,
Right. And you don't know, no one has a quality ranking on their feedback provider checklist, right? I mean, it's just, you've just got to take it. I think the important feedback is stuff that is consistent between and among people. That there's some meaning there. If 10 people tell you something similar, that's pretty interesting. And then the outliers, you know, some really insightful, oh, I mean, just like you looking at that number 56 print and saying, oh, you look at that long enough and it goes the other way. Wow, that's cool. I get it once you pointed it out, but I was way too close to the source to perceive that. And that's really valuable to me because, you know, you get too close to things. You don't realize you put your shirt inside out on, you know, that day.
let me check mine. Okay, it's
Yeah, yeah, check yours, yeah.
So when you have been submitting since 1983, did
Mm-hmm.
you have immediate success when you submitted your artwork? I mean, tell me, what was the reality of submitting and then your expectations for getting recognized, and how long did it really take?
Well, that's a good question. It, when you're younger, I was younger when I first started out at this, right? You know, it was at 40 some years ago. And everything's exciting you don't have you only have positive expectations, but you really don't know what happens and how it works. So to get your first couple of acceptances, right, is a real big deal. And I remember my first show, solo show, um, in I guess 1980, yeah, 83, 84, in Tacoma. I actually, framing, I had worked in a frame shop, but I knew framing was expensive. So I went to the bank. I got my first bank loan just and they gave me a loan, which is amazing. I explained my whole thing just to frame my show, right? So there's this whole expectation of, hey, now what? You know, it's great to the ego to get accepted, but you have to think through what you're really committing to. So suddenly I was committing to hanging 25 prints, well framed, with mats at the time, and that's very, very expensive. So my expectation was, hey, great, my art is seen, but then the reality is, wow, I gotta take the time that either having it framed or framing it myself and putting forward the cash and learning the proper techniques and stuff like that, because there are generally considered best practices to hanging art and stuff. I mean, that's a lot of my time. To get into any of these art exhibitions, you actually have to have artist statements and you have to have bios and you have to have different sets of work and you have to title things right. And if you do it all yourself, you have to do art cards and there's whole admin front end of doing stuff that takes a lot of time. You got to submit applications and pay online and all this jazz. So that takes up more time than one would imagine, and is in a way, I'd say, a barrier or a hoop that if you're really, really serious, you go through.
So I guess what that does is really begs a commitment, really, from the artist to go through those hoops, as you say, and be willing to put the money and time into it without knowing if there's even going to be a return on investment.
Right.
But really, I would think that you have to set that aside and just go for what feels right, and then make the investment in the time, in the money, and everything else, and then things fall where they will, right?
Yeah, that's kind of, it's really living your vision through, because the vision becomes operational, in real life. To make the vision in your artwork real to other people, you have to go through all this rigmarole of making prints and stuff. So it's also taught me to be very patient with my mistakes. I mean, even an hour ago, for one of these prints, I realized I had entered the wrong dimensions, and the print came out. I sprayed it and stuff, and then I had to cut it down. It's like, oh no, how could I do that? Right?
Yeah,
I
right.
screwed up. It's like, ah. So
Mm-hmm.
so like with any endeavor, really, that you get focused on, I allow about 10 or 15% screw ups right off. Well, that's my screw up for this project. It'll
Yeah.
cost me some time and some anguish, but the goal is to do it in time enough. Give yourself enough wiggle room with time, so that you're not frantic the night before you have to hang your artwork or ship your artwork.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's,
I know somewhat what you're talking about. I had a couple of shows in Parker, a town not too far away from where I live, and had to select which ones I wanted to put together, make the creation, the collection, a common theme, and you know, um, get it shipped or hauled over there, hung, and all that fun stuff with all the other artists who want the same space. Kind
mm-hmm.
of, yeah,
It's not,
it's
and if you
challenging.
have to ship stuff cross country, like I've done before COVID,
Yeah, yeah,
before the pandemic, when people would physically show up for galleries, I would ship stuff two or three cartons sometimes, because you have to pack them gingerly and all that. And boy, that's a lot. It's a lot of money,
yeah.
and it's a lot of, I was a shipping clerk in my first job, so those skills come in handy. But you have to buy
Yeah,
special boxes and all this stuff with fine art. It's part of that, seeing your vision through the execution of it.
exactly. So another question for you. Two more. We covered this a little bit, but for the younger artists who are just starting out, and I see a lot. I belong to a couple of artists' Facebook groups, to
Mm-hmm.
get a feel for what's going on out there. Um, and I love a lot of what I'm seeing, and yet the artists are still young. They really don't know anything about anything in terms of getting their work out. How do I price it? How do I sell it? All these things. Um, what would you suggest for some good first steps for them?
Just as I mentioned before, get in community,
Yeah, yeah.
because the community has people with experience who can help you, um, not only for the aesthetic aspect of your artwork, but for the business side, the pricing, how to present, what's a good venue, what cafes are worth hitting up for showing your artwork or not. Um, that'd be one piece. The other piece is to go out and talk with gallery owners and managers and see what they're looking for. The third piece is um, it's hard to tell someone, be creative, right? That's, do that at 12 o'clock tomorrow, right? Be creative. But my point would be, um, find out, aim to get your own sense of insight into your artwork. What do you like about the scene? Try to, or arrange a scene, studio work, or even with software, Photoshop work. what do you want to design here? What do you want to pull together that is important to you that you want to share with the world? And I also say to younger artists, be patient with yourself. In my experience, I've done this for 50 some years. I think even with digital tools, it takes 3 to 6 years for somebody to actually figure out both the technology and, more importantly, the light. Photography is about capturing and managing light, period. And it's not easy to read the light in the world. We're not taught to do that growing up or in school. So read the light. And photography is funny. It's a little different than other arts in that you have an intermediary tool called a camera and software that you kind of have to learn how to exploit and use, and then exploit some more to create what you want to create. And sometimes it means trusting the camera, and sometimes it means, hey, I'm smarter than that camera, so I have to do things in a few additional steps. Some people say shoot it manual. I mean, whatever it takes. I don't, you know. The good news is that all cameras are great. They're unbelievable compared to when we were younger, right? And it's just amazing now. It's hard to take a bad photograph
Right.
generally. So the cameras are good, and that puts the onus more on you, the artist, at getting your vision out and refining it
Mm-hmm.
and perfecting it and thinking in terms of mastery over decades.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think that with the software, it helps flatten that timeline a little bit. You know, it depends on how much time someone's willing to put in to their craft, really.
Yes, and the craft is the repeatability,
Yeah.
the ability to do it again and again in better and more masterful ways.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain efficiency, I guess I want to call it, in the craft, so that every time is not like the first time,
Yes.
right? So you can cut to the chase and really drill down to what you want to focus on in developing the shot, producing the shot. I'm a big believer that digital cameras are designed so that you should use software to really not enhance it, to make the image.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, you can do stuff in camera, and a well-framed shot in camera is really important.
Right.
And luck happens as well, and that should be honored. With photography, I think luck is 20%, 20 to 30% of everything anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But once you have that image in your sensor and then on your memory card, the software will really add depth and allow you to add yourself through that tool. But it takes time to learn.
That it does. That it does. I know.
To that degree.
You use Photoshop, and you have for extensively since I've known you, and I use
Yeah.
Aperture, which I still enjoy using, and I've considered doing Photoshop, and I just, you know, I like how Aperture treats the images well. Like, you know, just zeroing in on where exactly I want to enhance or whatever. So
Yeah.
and the thing about digital, I remember reading, is our naked eye can see one thing, but the camera picks up so much more. The information itself is there, and then once you see it on screen, then you can start developing the image based on what we see.
Or based on what you want to see,
What you want
right?
to see, right?
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It's all good to me. I mean, we
Yeah.
each have our own pathways to getting an image, and the interesting part is, in an exhibition, nobody cares. Nobody cares if these shots I have started out in an SX70. All they care about is how it looks on the wall.
Exactly right.
As artists, we enjoy the path, the journey,
Yep.
right? That's our private conceits in a way.
Yeah.
But it's the result, and for magazines, especially for publications, it's the results that matter
Mm-hmm.
to people. And so we have this dual realities that we're kind of pursuing: the journey and the product.
Yeah, for sure. So one final question, and then we'll wrap up. So if you had a crystal ball, what would you think is going to be changing anytime in the near future to 5 to 10 year horizon for artists in general?
Ah, that's a great question. I think art will continue to integrate in all sorts of media. For photography, you're going to integrate in text, you're going to integrate in 3D modeling, you're going to integrate in video into some mishmash of a wonderful new hybrid work. We're going to, out of the traditional boxes of straight images on a wall or on a screen. And it's all good. I mean, I will keep producing images on a wall because prints are real to me, but I respect different paths. I think the role of computers and computational photography is going to impact not just photography, but other art that will see and be influenced by the products of computational photography. Anyone who has one of the newer iPhones with 3 lenses in it, what's cool are not just the lenses per se, that's nice, and the tricks you can do with the software, but the fact that those 3 lenses can be used by the computing system to triangulate the image and do physics computations to present more 3D models and give you a more accurate and interesting images. Unlike a traditional one lens model, right? Which is like 2-dimensional. This really gives you the 3rd dimensional with 3 lenses. And the impact on art is just starting to be seen. And so I suspect all the camera makers will incorporate multiple lenses and to provide you with more of a 3D or more, visual treat over time.
And brave new world in artistry and photography. And
yeah, it's cool. I'm a neophile. I love to still embrace new tools and new processes. Keeps you young, and
right.
And photography has always been technologically driven and dependent, and money too. You got to pay to play, unfortunately. Generally, though, you're using aperture. That's great. You're still getting mileage out of that. That's good.
I am, surprisingly, and there was a couple of enhancements by a company I can't remember the name of now that was absorbed by Google, but they do. You can enhance specific areas of images and do that in a lot of different places to bring out certain elements, right, of the bigger picture. All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time, man. I've really enjoyed first talking with you, seeing you. It's been a while since we've connected. Years. And it's always good listening and talking photography. So any final words that you'd like to offer up?
Well, I'd just like to thank you, Glenn, for that, for talking with me. And say you're welcome. It's great. It's just great to chat. Good to see you.
Yeah.
And hopefully your listeners and viewers will find this of benefit.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we'll
be in touch.
We'll be in touch for sure. So